Want to say hello and a warm welcome to all lovely listeners, and of course to our lovely guests Manuela and Arne, who share their knowledge of text and the use of AI in the process with us today.
And I would like to give you some information about where we got to know each other, Arne, Manuela, and myself, if I may. Some weeks ago, Manuela wrote a wonderful blog post, and one of the subtitles was, and she's a copywriter, and she wrote, change is necessary. I think it's a wonderful German, as it was put in German, Veränderung tut Not. And she speaks about us copywriters, and I still consider myself a copywriter because I learned that craft in the past. And she said that as copywriters, we have to adapt, and that, of course, AI will play a very important role, can play a role, and will play a role in our lives as copywriters. And I noticed Arne, because he advertises on his websites that he is a copywriter eliminating himself. These are two copywriters speaking about the topic of AI, saying that it will change our profession. And without saying too much, I want to say that for some weeks, we've been in an intensive exchange about our job as copywriters, how it's going to change in the next 12 to 24 months, the necessary adaptations that will happen. And these are very exciting discussions that we are carrying out with each other. Independently of that discussion, we want to know about the opinion of these two copywriters in terms of copywriting as a craft. And of course, automation will play a role. We will build a bridge here. And we have two presentations that were produced specifically for this afternoon. And Manuela is going to start with a presentation she's going to give, and she will, of course, speak to the presentation, to the slides. But the slides will be in German, but we also have them in English, and we will share both the English and the German slides with you. You'll have access to both. And Manuela will speak about the difference between the advertising and the sales tax. I'm not going to give away more. Manuela, would you take the floor, please? Share your screen. Introduce yourself briefly and then start your presentation. And I'm going to mute my microphone and I will just listen in. Thank you very much, Simon, for your kind introduction. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm asking everybody, can you see my screen? Yes, we can see it. Thank you, Heike. I would like to welcome you all to my presentation, Advertising Tax versus Sales Tax. My name is Manuela Frenzel. I'm a copywriter. I'm self-employed. And how did I end up with that topic? When researching keywords and when cooperating with customers, I noticed that the difference between advertising text and sales text is something customers are not aware of. So let me start by speaking about the advertising text. Advertising is a creative act. The texts are subtle and are not necessarily aimed at an action. Advertising copy is a long-term, convincing work that, and over time, they can strengthen brand identity and loyalty. They are not measurable. The advertising copy isn't measurable. I have a quote by Leo Burnett that I find is very suitable. It's on advertising text. Make it simple, make it memorable, make it inviting to look at, and make it fun to read. Advertising texts, and this is the first difference, they address unknown recipients. I'm going to speak about the sales text later on. They address a target group. Advertising texts are created based on a combination of humanities and social science disciplines. And therefore, it's important that the texts should be simple in structure, wording, and understanding. Because advertising is aimed at the general public. This is why it's very important that everybody understand the texts. Advertising texts focus on creativity, attention, and conciseness. Advertising copy creates images in the mind, takes interested parties on a journey, and stimulates as many of the potential customer senses as possible. An important criterion, and you can see that in advertising text for banks in particular, what's important is transparency. And a copywriter should display empathy, otherwise the person can't write advertising texts. Advertising texts, and here you find some examples, can be found in television, radio advertising, newspapers, magazines, outdoor advertising, and in social media. It was only recently, over the weekend, that I saw that there is the intention to ban outdoor advertising. That would be very difficult for people who work in that field, but I'm not going to dwell on that in this context. The aim of advertising texts is to attract attention. They communicate, so it's important that they are understood. You can create new demand with them. The focus is always on the customer benefit. The benefit for the customer, that's what counts. What advertising text should not communicate? Other than the sales text, they should not trigger a buy it now feeling. They shouldn't be scientific texts. No scientific text in advertising. Don't use technical jargon if possible. That's not always something you can avoid, but try not to. Stir up emotions that trigger negative feelings. This is something that should be avoided. We know that are confronted with negative news every day. We are confronted with everything that doesn't work. And this is why advertising text should just infuse, entertain, and raise and reflect longings and desires of the people. What advertising can do, advertising text, is to provide entertainment, generate attention, and communicate advocacy for a purchase. You create a demand with advertising texts. You also create a customer base, and it can support and enhance your marketing efforts. The disadvantages are that you address a broader audience. This is why it takes time, because there is no immediate solution like in sales texts. And it's difficult to prove that advertising triggered a purchase. This brings me to my topic. I'm a direct response copywriter. In the English-speaking world, there is this term, but in the German-speaking regions, sales text equal advertising text. We don't differentiate in German. The aim of a sales text is to make people act, to trigger an action. Don't convince people, but the focus is that I offer a solution to the customer. I take the customer by the hand and show the customer how to get to this solution. And most of the direct response advertising texts and their result is measurable. Here I have a Eugene Schwartz quote. Copywriting cannot create desire for a product. It can only take the hopes, dreams, fears, and desires that already exist in the hearts of millions of people and focus those already existing desires onto a particular product. And this is the copywriter's task, to channel and direct this mass desire. Sales texts speak directly to a target group that I analyzed and researched in advance. This is what advertising copywriters don't do. The sales sales texts are written in a sales-oriented, empathetic way to persuade a target audience prospects. I take the customer on a journey away from a problem towards the solution. And in this context, and this is different from advertising ads, I build in case studies, customer assessments, reviews, awards. What is important? That it has to match the service and the product. Not every proof of confidence matches every product. Sales texts, therefore, are stronger in their impact than advertising texts because they're oriented to a research target group. And this is why It's also said that sales texts are pre-thought sales conversations. Just think about the pandemic. Many smaller stores were closed, many companies as well, and they couldn't welcome customers. They depended on selling online and carrying out the conversation online. And to this end, you needed sales texts. Usually they are available in a long format. They are also exist in a short format at Facebook, for instance. I appreciate the long format very much because I can convince more, I can persuade more, I can confront and counteract objections and convince of the quality of the service or product. And I focus on the customer's benefit. And to this end, I use a marketing and advertising psychology. The long format is perfect for search engines as well. If you think about or plan to put it online, where are they used? I'm giving you some examples. I wrote for sales pages, for sales letters, for online presentations. I haven't done that yet, but today I do so. And the aim of sales tags consists in the following. I'm the marketer, I'm the vendor, the person selling something. If another pandemic comes along, I hope it's not going to happen, but if it happens that stores are closed, I am the right person to contact for sales texts because I deal with your target group in a very targeted manner. I also apply psychology. I understand, I have an in-depth understanding of human beings. I know about their most profound desires and wishes and write in a way that they find the solution. I take our customers by the hand to the solution. And the focus is not on self-promotion of the company, but the focus is always on the customer benefit. Here you see the advantages, a targeted approach, because that's different in an advertising text. I bring evidence. The texts can always be adapted at any time once they're online. I bring about measurable results. And the disadvantages are the following. In advertising, in writing advertising text, we write for a broader audience. Sales texts are directed to a special target group. This can be a disadvantage. And as copywriters, I have to be informed about latest regulations, consumer protection, for instance. And I have to address the fact that the target group is increasingly critical because they are better informed. They are in an overflow. Maybe you're aware of that. What do I do if there is just too much information? I don't want to know anything. And this is what I want to avoid. In a nutshell, I can say that the advertising texts are about recruiting new customers and welcoming them. And when I start working, when we are speaking about sales texts, because I take you by the hand, I present the solution, and I lead the customer to purchase or registration. This brings me to the end. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask them in the chat, or later on you can also contact me. Here you find my contact details, the website URL, and the LinkedIn address. And I also have something else for you. If you haven't dealt with that topic in your company, I have drawn up a checklist on the topic of building trust, which you can download if you want to. It's available in German and English. So with that, thank you very much for your attention, or thanks to Sim and Heike for inviting me, and I give the floor back to Heike or Sim. Great. Thank you so much. We tend to underestimate this topic of when are we advertising something and when are we selling, and in how far do we address the target group specific needs, and what do we do with objections And in advertising, it is about leading people, guiding them. And when selling, we are much closer to the people. And we have to make sure that certain aspects are included. We have to formulate them very clearly for our addressees. And then I sell a pair of jeans differently as compared to how I deal with it in an advertising text. In sales text, I have to speak about sizes, maybe in an advertising text. In the sales text, that's where this information is important. And thank you very much, Manuela. We're going to discuss later on. Thank you very much for now. And I've just looked into the chat. There is no question in the chat yet. So without any further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Arne. Arne, you're going to share your presentation with us, right? And I give you the floor, you take over, you briefly introduce yourself, and then you can surprise us with everything you want to present and share with us. Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for this introduction. Thank you very much, Heike, for inviting me for the previous work, Manuela. It's funny because I was on a holiday for a week and then some things popped up and I thought, well, that's a great topic Manuela is going to speak about. She's going to present the range between the sales texts and advertising texts and the difference. And I'm going to add to that polarity you raised, and I'm going to start leading you through a customer journey, bearing these two aspects in mind. And I'm going to share my screen. It tells me that I was sharing my screen. I don't know if you can see that. Who has written all that? We don't see your presentation. It hasn't really worked yet. I should better share the right screen. Okay. So let's try again. Share screen. This is the right one. Okay. So the question's always very valuable. What are we going to see or to show? There's such a lot of content. Who is going to write all that content that's needed? I am the copywriter that does away with himself, and I'm not going to write it. I'll be pleased to write all that together with you all and with machines. For years, basically, I've been enjoying doing that with other companies who actually write all that. So this brings me to the next page. And when humans and machines play well together, great opportunities emerge. According to Abraham Lincoln. Well, he probably did never say that. This is totally wrong, but it seems credible, doesn't it? If I tell a machine, speak about the human and human-machine interface, this could be a result. Or GPT-3 and other language models, if you take them, they might be saying that the machines say what they learned in machine learning. And I think that Abraham Lincoln is the person who's most quoted in history. So if a machine mixes up things, what would be the outcome? That would probably be the outcome. So much on having a machine in the team. Let's get back to a time where the team was very small, the copywriters team. This is Don Draper. You know him from Mad Men. And he's thinking and thinking again. He's probably quite fast, and he comes up with an idea of such an ad. It needs a headline, a picture. It's not only, he wasn't only a texter, but also a creative director. The car has a strong sex appeal, and then there are 4 lines of text, and that's it. And everything Manuela was speaking about, the objections, the advantages, the disadvantages, all this doesn't happen in the text. It happens in the personal conversation. What does the salesperson do with the customer? That's the question. And it's unequivocal that there were junior text copywriters at Don Draper's agency who had to write a leaflet about the trunk concept of this Buick. Don Draper, he was probably a diva. He didn't want to do that himself. Well, high involvement, therefore, as we can state, is a car that you just don't buy in passing. You always needed a lot of information, more information than a one-pager. Some products just received this high involvement. In the past, a ketchup bottle was a ketchup bottle. Today, you have to explain how much sugar is not in this ketchup and if it's really vegan. And you all know that the digital world has more touch points than ever for the customer journey. Who is going to write all that? I'm trying not to. If somebody has to do all that, probably the person has a burnout already. As a brand, you need more than one creative person. So let's build a team. And I like the survey you asked at the beginning. I didn't know that, but I like it. Where do you belong? Marketing, SEO team, product data management, content team. These are the people who can become copywriters. Why do you need a separate copywriter? Well, let's start with the customer journey. What can we expect? There's a simple model from the past. It's called attention, interest, desire, action. AIDA is the acronym. And I've never really understood what interest and desire means in this context. Attention is clear. It's what Manuela described as an advertising text, and action is what in the times of Don Draper was carried out, happened in the showroom. Today, part of it is done online. We use sales texts. And this is why it's worthwhile fiddling around with that model a bit. Let's assume, and you see that in black on white, attention, interest, diligence, action. It's still AIDA as an acronym. And let's assume that we have rational customers who scrutinize and check the offer, and less rational, it's attention, desire, information, and action. There are many things to be explained and objections to be refuted and advantages to be discussed, as you heard from Manuela. And it's that model that I want to keep using, and I want to speak about the text that has to be written in that connection. And there's a lot of text. In the past, the salesperson did all that. And there was this moment of fear that everybody experiences on his or her way of being a copywriter. The question is, do I have it at the beginning and don't start at all? Or do I just realize that there is so much out there? So what do we have? We have attention. This is the advertising ad, the billboard or poster. It was known when Don Draper was active, but today it's an influencer post or a lookalike ad on Facebook or Instagram, where people don't know yet that they want us, but we can show them we have something that you've seen with the competitors. We've got that as well. And then desire, I think that applies when people have already expressed that this is what they're looking for. In that instance, SEO helps us, or search engine advertising or retargeting. People joined us already, but then they left. Maybe we can attract them again. Information, this is everything that happened in the showroom in the past. But other things that as well, that don't happen in the showroom. They already took place in customer service arena also in the past. And action, well, it's the checkout, add to cart, newsletter signups. These are the things where we want the people to act. It's a call for action. Who is going to write all that? And before we look at the landscape, I can tell you that almost everybody, and everybody if possible, turn the technical experts in to become part of the content creation. The subject matter experts know their field. Make use of that knowledge, make them reveal that knowledge. They are not, all of them are good writers, good copywriters, but then the copywriters can help. They have the feeling that they are owners of their own content, and you know that very often you present them with their own content for an update, but you can do that from the start. You can present and make them part of their own content. What does the copywriter do? The copywriter is there as well, but he or she only supervises the headlines or calls to action. Headlines at the beginning and calls to action at the end. The copywriters help to create prototypes and templates, but they shouldn't write everything themselves, but they should leave it to the subject matter experts. They should be able to provide support. The subject matter experts can do that, and machines can also help if they can't. And this is what the landscape looks like. Don Draper is still a diva, and maybe we've got more service-oriented copywriters and also the influencers themselves. That's the first column, attention. The desire, you've got SEO experts in your team, you've got the paid experts and the copywriter still. In information, the copywriter should be able to receive support, should have the role of a journalist, like the customer service employees, the stories the salespersons can tell. And the copywriter should be able to benefit from that knowledge. And at the end, it's the copywriter again that receives the psychology by the converting experts. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. So he or she receives support. Let's now touch on AI, machine software. It's supposed to help us. I use three different kinds we're talking about here, and we're going to speak about that today. Content optimizers like Phrase, MarketMuse, ClearScope, or Surfer. Some of them are also called SEO tools and sell themselves accordingly. And then we've got language models, GPT-3, that's the hype topic. If it's used with commercially, variants like Jarvis or Neuroflash. And then there's rule-based AI, and this is why we're here. Semantics helps us to scale. And there is a lot more, from transcription so that you can receive what the salesperson has told you. In writing, we're not going to speak about proofreading today. Let's have the three groups in our landscape. In attention, speaking about the advertising text, GPT-3 and Jarvis and Neuroflash can help with fast results, but also with a lot of crap. The outcome is quotes like the one we've just seen from Abraham Lincoln, and this is what you have to do away with as a copywriter later on. You have to sort that out. And then desire is what people are looking for. In the SEO experts will carry out keyword research, and they might use Ahrefs or Semrush's tricks, you name it. And there's a new category, which is phrase. Let's call it a plagiarism machine. I'm going to show you some use cases later on. And in information, in that column, we can use a phrase as well and create things. Particularly in the FAQ segment, we can create headlines with Jarvis, and semantics can be used. You know that from the many contributions you're seeing here and the training documents about how to scale in a reliable manner. And fourth, we've got action, GPT-3, Jarvis and Neuroflash to produce a lot of material you can use for testing purposes later on, to test what works. And in order to know what works, you have to try it out. Now I'm going to show you some use cases before we finish. First, we've got the desire section with phrase. To put it very bluntly, this is the fastest way to plagiarize your competitors. This is an example of in German. It's one of mine examples. This is on the right-hand side of the software, you see the results. I access with a keyword, and then usually I end up with 20 results. Here I'm not showing the shopping results because I want to write in long format. I And then I go through it paragraph by paragraph. This is a text that's not unique. The machine tells me where it found it before I rewrite it. And then I use Jarvis to rewrite it. And then there's another use case, again, with phrase, same topic, same keyword. FAQs. All the questions others have answered, I should also answer them. I can also assess Quora and Reddit. I've never been faster drawing up FAQs. All the SEO experts know how much this helps in searches. These are two use cases with phrase. Let's now touch on Jarvis and NeuroFlash and GPT-3 based language models. This is not capable of anything. This is just Don Draper overcoming his writing blockade. This is just a very expensive parrot. But this can be very useful if you want to be faster. If I think about, as junior copywriters, the lists we drew up, the templates, and then the creative director sorted all that and threw it away, I can write very fast. I can write a block with a briefing, 5 words. I preset 5 words, and Jarvis writes me a list. And when I click on compose, there's another 5 or 10 new things coming up. I have a lot of things I cannot use, but there's one thing that I liked, RoboCopy. This is how I call it on my website. You can also find my contact details there. And AX semantics, I don't have to tell you a lot about your own backyard. Simon and others have already done that. I mean, for reliable scaling, you invest energy as a copywriter before that, and then it works in many languages and products. This is how it works. If you are willing to work with machines together with me, follow me for news and deep dives into the individual use cases. A lot is going on Twitter. LinkedIn hasn't joined in yet, but if subscribe to the newsletter and I'll let you know whenever I start being active on other platforms. That was the copywriter who's eliminating himself, and this ends my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much. We've heard from 2 copywriters approaching the topic of AI and want to discuss very openly about where they're using it. I like the use cases and the example of Abraham Lincoln that moved me most. Imagine that you request a quote, you ask for a quote, and as Abraham Lincoln has been quoted so much, assumes that every newly created quote in the world has to be from Abraham Lincoln, because the machine assessment said that statistically he is quoted most often in the world. I love that example because it shows that the most expensive parrot of the world is capable of doing. I don't want to kill the parrot. I like this idea of being inspired, of looking at what the competitors do. Or what do you think about that, Arne? About the other tools you've just mentioned, how do you categorize that? Well, customer journey, we can speak about the copywriter's journey or the copy journey. If you create a lot of long formats, what you need is an editorial plan. And then you can brainstorm about what we want to talk about. What are we good at? What do our customers want to know from us? And there's another thing. SEO can be used for market research. And you can look at what keywords have a high search volume. I mean, what is worthwhile to create content about, because it is likely that the content will be read. And I think that in this context, phrase is a very good methodology to achieve a lot in a short period. To create long format articles that don't belong to me yet because it's just plagiarism. But as a copywriter, you, together with the subject matter experts, you can speak about that and discuss if something is accurate or not. And then they come up with it. No, 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 you'd rather say this or that. Instead of reflecting in a vacuum, asking the experts in a vacuum about the most important aspects. I think Phrase is a great tool to come up with many questions I can ask to product experts. I don't have to publish them as FAQs. I can also take them with me to an interview and ask our service rep, how would you answer that question? And then it becomes unique. In the interview, I take the service representative and I ask the questions, I transcribe the answers, and that's it. I'm ready with my FAQs. They don't come up with finalized text. AX Semantics only creates the text once a lot of energy and brain matter, so to speak, has been invested before. And Phrase is a great market research tool to carry out interviews with experts in your own company, questions to customer service reps, discussing outlines with product experts. This is marvelous. And Jarvis and everything else based on GPT-3. Well, as a copywriter, you can lean back and say, I'm the creative director. And I have 10 bad junior copywriters writing for me. So my role has changed. I don't have to have a white piece of paper anymore in front of me, but it's someone else filling out that piece of paper. And then I can pick and choose. At the beginning, it felt like too much for me. This is too much. But now I think that it would be poor psychology to say in a brainstorming that we need a good idea. We should say we need an idea. And you should have an error-tolerant culture, no, but in which people would come up with bad ideas, so that afterwards we'll create a short list of 3 ideas out of the 200. And GPT-3 is quite good at that. Many things are totally irrelevant. Subtitles, for instance, in long format, it's good at that. Because it's good at producing boring subtitles or interim titles, as you know it from machine translation. You enter a good German text, the outcome is an acceptable English text, but it's boring because it has been mainstreamed. Well, we have, excuse me, but we have one question in the chat. We're not going to give any names, but the question is as follows. Can you give examples about how and where you use GPT-3 and what do you think about the current quality of it? This reflects what many customers ask us at this point, and we should give a very specific answer about where and how we use it and what we think about the quality. Well, I'll start by tackling the second question, the quality. GPT-3 formulates great texts in English based on the choice of words and grammar. If you consider that, it's a typing machine, a typewriter with a very good quality. In German, sometimes it fails and you can't predict the failures. I can't assess the other languages. My assumption is the more exotic, the poorer the quality. This should be a result of machine learning. If the training set is smaller, the machine decreases. And then there is the quality. I mean, the content might be nonsense. The machine can write texts, but it can't think. There is one legendary example about GPT-3 asking a table which is too big, how you get it through a door which is too small. And GPT-3 is one of many answers. I mean, it comes up with many answers. It knows that it doesn't know anything. This is why it offers lots of answers. And one of the possibilities is very absurd. It says, turn around, put it and take off the legs. It fulfills the requirements because the table will fit through this door. It doesn't make sense at all, but it's funny. So the question is, well, how did the machine learn it? Well, it went through the whole of the internet, but probably no one dealt with that topic in text. Maybe there are only videos or schemes or IKEA manuals with icons without text. How is that poor fellow machine supposed to know? Maybe it learned about jokes like from Frisia, the Eastern Frisia. They have very often we make jokes about this kind of people where they come from the north of Germany, and maybe there was that joke, how do they put the table through the door, and they cut off the legs. So this is why GPT-3 might have come up with that answer. And it's an awful text tool, in my opinion. In the best of all cases, it can be inspiring because it's absurd very often, but it's a great sparring partner for subject matter experts who can assess what is nonsense and what isn't. And with GPT-3, if you think about the way an interview is journalistically presented, you can carry out interviews. Dear GPT-3, for instance, what do you think about a diet which is rich in fat? And then there's a paragraph, and then you say, okay, this is good, and this isn't good, and then there's the next question, and you interview the machine. Sometimes you come up with good ideas. You said it very nicely, this white paper syndrome. This is a good inspiration. Many of our customers carry out and do product text, and then you can use keywords and see what results come up and turn that into something good. But I'm of your opinion, and in the chat I've just been reading that it's nonsense but funny. This is what you mentioned with your example of the table. Manuela, I'd like to speak about sales tax with you. In your presentation, you raised it to a meta level. What is an advertising tax and what is a sales tax? But if you break that down to product texts, what are 2 or 3 very specific features? What is part and parcel of any product text? What can we tell our product copywriters about that scaling model like egg semantics? What should be part and parcel of a product text and the sales text at the end of the day, because they want to sell? So what should be included? Honesty. Now I'm really flabbergasted. It's just one word, honesty. Well, okay. This high quality piece of furniture is crap if it's not really of good quality. We have to cut that out. He said shit. Saim said shit. So we have to cut that out of the video. If this piece of furniture isn't of a high quality, you shouldn't say it's of high quality. This is what I meant. This is also what I wanted to say about when I said transparency. Let me give you an example that refers to women. I order a business blouse in a store. The picture shows that it's not transparent. You can't see through it. It's delivered to me. I put it on and you can see everything. At least in the text, you should make a reference, like mention it at least. Or I received the delivery of a refrigerator, but you can't put it into the kitchen because it's too loud. You should put it into the basement, but that wasn't mentioned in the sales text. This is what I mean by honesty. This is what I'm missing in many stores or shops. This is the strategy billiger.de have in their text, because they have a paragraph where they mention the disadvantages. They don't necessarily sell the product, but then they say, hey, if that is something you want or you don't want, click further until you get there or there, where you find another product, a different product. But honesty is very important, as you're saying. And even if it lowers your conversion, if I assess the customer well and tell him it's good if you want to have a power nap, but this sofa bed isn't good for sleeping on it, that's something that's better. So what else? What else do you think should definitely be included in addition to this strong statement of honesty being important? That's what comes up, honesty. Using lots of adjectives. Usually we should avoid adjectives, but there are adjectives that describe a product in a better way so that it raises the appeal of a product. For instance, preparing a description in a way that you trigger the desire to purchase. This is what I want to have. I want to be part of this seminar, for instance, whatever. But you were referring to product text. Okay. Well, emotionalizing is a very important aspect. Yes, but very often that is inexistent in shops. Yes, and with adjectives, you can emotionalize, and this is what makes people put it into the shopping cart, and this is why at the end of the day, I spend much more. Or
Informatikprodukten passt das
in
nicht.
IT products, for instance, you can't do it. But you should know how to convince women and how to convince men or tech nerds. The target group. Address the target group. But that's difficult nowadays. Well, there are many different aspects. Arne, in the chat, there was a nice question. Taking the subject matter experts on board to take them into the text, to take them on board on the text board, but they don't have much time. What would be your tip? How can this be done explicitly? What is your tip? And I'm very honest that I had to do that, getting the subject matter experts on board for the intranet, for instance, and they never have time. Maybe you can give us a hint about what we can do to get the experts on board. Well, that's exactly it. If you want to relaunch a website and you need the experts, and then they will tell you just start. So they will not be on board right away. But then there's the review process, and then they have to approve. And there was some hope in that people, if they don't have to write something, if they are just allowed to speak about something, they tell you what they always didn't like about a certain piece of content. So let them do a review about something that was there already, or let them get upset about why we do it differently as our competitors. Why aren't we saying this? We are also capable of saying that. We can say that too. So these are two approaches. And then call, Zoom, record it, transcribe it, and then the text is done. This gives the copywriter a briefing which is unique, different from plagiarizing it with phrase. I see a question. Is the tool existing in German already? Yes, it does exist already, but I don't want to make publicity for someone else. This is a competitor's product. I think GPT-3 has a totally different task, but there's a question. Am I allowed to mention that name? Adela, it's an AX employee. And she asks, what about, do you only work with the English versions of GPT-3, or are there already tools for German? Adela just wanted to point out that you can do it in German. Well, I had access to a scientific beta of GPT-3. It works in German and in English. In English, it works better. This is what I described before in my quality assessment. Jarvis is a commercial product everybody could book. It can be used in German and English. They have many English templates. But if you allow for enough lead time, there is a mode that looks back what it wrote in the previous paragraphs. And if there's enough German text, it can continue quite well in German. And you can force it, as I said, and I'm just testing. I can't really say anything about it. I'm testing something. The Neuroflash guys convinced me that their German is better than the German of others, and they do it differently. They don't have more input with more German, but they are saying that they let GPT-3 deliver more output, brute force, and then they have an AI-based filter on top of it that is culturally trained for German. I don't really know yet how it works, but this is something I'm going to test next. Well, we have to keep a look on the time. There's one last point I want to mention, as we have two high caliber speakers here. If I want to scale a product description, in my point of view, with GPT-3, it only works with a lot of work. I have to enter the keywords, the core points, and I have to produce the text. I have to copy it manually. So I have 3,000 texts or 20,000 texts to write, or 4 million per month as one of our biggest customers, just as a demarcation. Where do you use GPT-3 from your point of view? And where can I use AX semantics? I think that there's a lot of space for both products in the markets, but what is the difference? Where does it work and where doesn't it work? Manuela, do you want to go? Who wants to start? I say that AX semantics can be used for product texts very clearly. So, because you have the API, the interface, GPT-3 doesn't have that interface. It's good for inspirations, but for product texts, I wouldn't use GPT-3.
Also sagen wir mal so, sehe ich definitiv in der Skalierung. Also
I see AX semantics being used if you want to have a reliable scaling. You don't have to double check if it's accurate. If you have good rules, if you build good rules and good templates, everything is accurate, not only in German, but also in English, French, and other languages. But still, at category level, you can use templates, build templates, and then you connect them. And GPT-3 can take away this white piece of paper syndrome. Well, dear participants, I'm going to sleep much better tonight because you just confirmed and you mentioned a highlight in that discussion round. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for sharing your presentations. We're going to share them with others. Of course, Heike, I give the floor back. You have to answer our survey. Very briefly, thanks to our simultaneous translator who's still with us longer than she's supposed to. And we asked about how you roughly categorize yourselves in your organization. Most of the people are in the content teams, a high percentage, 6% in product data management, 16% are in marketing, content team and marketing. There can be overlaps, and SEO 3%, and others that weren't explicitly mentioned, 22%. So for all those who are part of the product data management team, next time we're going to tackle that topic exactly. What do you have to bear in mind in the field of digitization, etc. And we will speak about using data 2 times or 3 times. Robert is going to speak about that next week. So put it in your calendar, share your calendar so that you have all the dates available. So thank you very much, and leave feedback. Please give us your feedback. Have we satisfied your expectations? Were you happy? Were you unhappy? Please, we also take that feedback to improve next time. And apart from that, Heike and myself, we say thank you very much for being here. Thanks to all the participants for discussing. Thanks to Simultandre, the translating teams. Great job, like always. We are pleased that you support us. Thanks on our part. It's been a pleasure, like always. Stay healthy, and we see each other again next Tuesday at the latest. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.